What was to be another defining race in a career built on breathtaking speeds and fearless driving turned into a somber day that would forever alter the course of Formula One. Today, we delve into the tragic events of the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix and the terrifying last minutes of one of the greatest drivers in the history of motorsport and F1. Ayrton Senna was a racing maestro whose life on the track was as compelling as it was heroic. Driver, innovator, strategist. Senna was to many F1 fans what Picasso and Michealangelo was to art. His commitment to pushing the limits of what seemed possible defined his career and inspired legions of fans and fellow drivers alike. With multiple world championships and countless victories, he was on a path to reshape Formula One with his vision and unrivaled talent. Until one fateful day at the Imola circuit, when a journey meant to showcase the pinnacle of his prowess instead became a chilling tale of how fast things can go wrong on the racetracks. Join us as we explore the life of a 34-year-old legend whose next great challenge was to further cement his status as perhaps the greatest of all time. If successful, he would have continued to dominate the sport he loved. But destiny had other plans. If, like me, your knowledge of Formula One is limited to late-night news sports section and the passing social media post, you might think Ayrton Senna came from the typical mold of racing prodigies, privileged backgrounds, born into racing royalty, groomed from an early age to dominate tracks. But that couldn't be further from the truth. While Ayrton did enjoy a comfortable upbringing, his entry into the world of racing was not preordained by family legacy. Ayrton's family wasn't known for racing. They were business people in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Ayrton's story isn't about racing trophies from a young age. It's about a boy who loved cars more than anything. Ayrton was born on March 21, 1960, as the middle child in his family, which meant he had to find ways to stand out. From the time he was very young, Ayrton loved anything that moved on wheels. He wasn't surrounded by racetracks or racing gear, but he had toys and go-karts that his father helped him play with. His dad, a successful businessman, saw how much Ayrton loved cars, so when Ayrton was just 4 years old, he made him a go-kart. It wasn't fancy, but for Ayrton, it was perfect. He would drive it around their big yard, pretending to be in real races. For Ayrton, this is where it all began, and soon the passion for wheels would make him one of the most famous sportsmen in the world. Growing up, Ayrton was just like any other kid. He went to school, played sports, and hung out with friends. He wasn't the top student. He was more known for being determined and sometimes a bit stubborn, qualities that would later help him in racing. As he grew, so did his fascination with cars. In his teenage years, Ayrton's family recognized his strong interest in competitive racing. It was clear that Ayrton needed more than just a backyard track to fulfill his dreams. When he was 13 years old, his father decided it was time to enter him in a more structured racing environment. He bought Ayrton his first real racing kart. This wasn't just any kart, it was built for competition, and it represented Ayrton's first step into the world of professional racing. Ayrton started competing in local karting championships. Karting is often considered the first serious step in a racer's career, and for Ayrton, it was no different. He was not merely participating. He was there to win. His dedication to understanding the mechanics of his kart, combined with his natural driving ability, made him stand out, even at a young age. Karting taught Ayrton much more than just how to drive. He learned about the dynamics of competitive racing, including the importance of precision, timing, and strategy. He spent hours practicing and studying other racers, learning from their techniques and their mistakes. His first races were not easy. Despite his talent, Ayrton faced challenges. Racing is a tough sport, where even a small mistake can cost you a race. But Ayrton was resilient. He analyzed each race to understand what went wrong and how he could improve. This meticulous attention to detail was something that would become a hallmark of his racing style. Senna went on to win the South American Kart Championship in 1977. He competed in the Karting World Championship each year from 1978 to 1982. Finishing runner-up in 1979 and 1980. By the age of 17, Ayrton had won several karting championships in Brazil. His success on the track was not unnoticed, and it started to become clear that he had the potential to go beyond national karting events. Ayrton began dreaming of racing in far-off Europe, where the competition was tougher and the opportunities were greater. With his family's support, Ayrton made the bold decision to move to Europe, a significant step, one that required him to leave his family and friends behind. In 1981, he moved to England with his wife, his chance to thrive in the heart of motor racing. This move was a leap into the unknown. Ayrton was entering a world where he was not known, where he had to prove himself all over again. In England, Ayrton joined the Van Diemen racing team, headed then under leading Formula Ford boss Ralph Furman, to compete in the Formula Ford 1600 series, a popular entry-level series for many future Formula One drivers. His adjustment to life in England was challenging. The weather, the food, and the language were all new to him, but his focus remained on racing. Ayrton's talent quickly shone through. He won the championship in his first season and quickly became known around the tracks as a potential future F1 racer. His journey from a young boy in Sao Paulo to a champion in England marked just the beginning of what would become an illustrious career in motor racing. But it was a career that nearly ended before it began. In late 1981, as his first racing season drew to a close, Ayrton faced a crossroads that could have prematurely ended his journey in motorsport. Pressure mounted from multiple fronts: his wife, unhappy with life abroad and longing for Brazil, and his family, who envisioned Ayrton taking a significant role in the family business back home. Caught between his family's expectations and his own racing ambitions, Senna found himself at a crossroads. Feeling the weight of these pressures, Senna returned to Brazil after the racing season. But back in Brazil during the winter of 1981, Senna was deeply unhappy. Working in the family business didn't fulfill him like racing did. He missed the adrenaline of races and the satisfaction of improving with each competition. Despite the comfort and security that his family's business offered, it was clear to Senna that his passion lay on the racetracks of Europe. After months of contemplation, and despite significant resistance from his family and ongoing marital strain, Senna made a pivotal decision. In February 1982, he chose to return to Europe to continue racing, a move that ultimately led to the end of his marriage. This decision marked a defining moment in Senna's life, highlighting his full commitment to racing, a commitment that would see him lose nearly everything else in pursuit of his dreams, and a commitment that would ultimately lead to a terrifying end. In 1984, Senna made his Formula One debut with the Toleman team. It wasn't the most competitive team on the grid, yet Senna's brilliance couldn't be overshadowed. His first season was marked by a number of impressive finishes, but it was the rain-soaked 1984 Monaco Grand Prix that truly highlighted his potential. In treacherous conditions, Senna started 13th, but sliced through the field to finish second. Many believe he would have won had the race not been prematurely halted due to the worsening weather. In the high-octane world of Formula One, the race against the clock and competitors is relentless, marked by precision, skill, and sheer speed. Each race typically involved Ayrton completing a set number of laps, with the race lasting approximately 90 minutes. He couldn't cut corners or go off track, or he risked penalties. His hands and feet are constantly at work, controlling the car's steering, braking, and acceleration, all while shifting gears up to 50 times per lap. To finish every race and be eligible for points, Ayrton not only had to complete the race, but also finish in the top 10. Formula One racing tested Ayrton Senna's ability to maintain control over a finely tuned race car at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour, navigating complex circuits that twist, turn, and undulate, demanding utmost concentration and physical endurance. The clock only stops when the checkered flag is waved, marking the completion of a grueling race where every millisecond counts. Ranked as one of the top drivers in the world, Senna was on a trajectory to become a legend in Formula One, especially after his brilliant breakout season. Early on and throughout his career, Senna was known for his ability to offer detailed technical insights about his car's performance and the track conditions, abilities that predated the widespread use of telemetry in Formula One. This technical acuity first came to the forefront during a memorable incident at the Dallas Grand Prix, as recalled by Pat Simons, Senna's first Formula One race engineer. The car was reasonably competitive there, so we expected to have a good race, but Ayrton spun early in the race. He then found his way back through the field in a quite effective way, and we were looking for a pretty good finish. But then he hit the wall, damaged the rear wheel in the drive shaft, and retired, which was a real shame. The real significance of that was that when he came back to the pits, he told me what happened and said, "I'm sure that the wall moved." And even though I've heard every excuse every driver has ever made, I certainly hadn't heard of that one. But Ayrton being Ayrton, with his incredible belief in himself, the absolute conviction. He then talked me into going with him after the race to have a look at the place where he had crashed. And he was absolutely right, which was the amazing thing. Dallas being a street circuit, the track was surrounded by concrete blocks, and what had happened, we could see it from the tire marks, was that someone had hit at the far end of the concrete block, and that made it swivel slightly, so that the leading edge of the block was standing out by a few millimeters. And he was driving with such precision that those few millimeters were the difference between hitting the wall and not hitting the wall. While I had been, at first, annoyed that we had retired from the race through a driver error, when I saw what had happened, when I saw how he had been driving, that increased my respect for the guy by quite a lot. That season, Senna secured additional podium finishes at the British and Portuguese Grand Prix, finishing 9th in the Drivers' Championship with 13 points. However, his season was not without controversy. Senna faced suspension from the Italian Grand Prix after entering negotiations with Lotus for the 1985 season without informing his then team, Toleman. His move to Lotus in 1985 provided him with a more competitive car, and he capitalized on this by winning his first Grand Prix in Portugal under conditions that were less than ideal. His mastery of wet conditions became a hallmark of his career, earning him the nickname the Rainman among fans and commentators alike. Another defining moment came in the 1988 season, his first with the McLaren team. Partnered with rival Alain Prost, Senna showed his relentless desire to push the limits of both himself and the sport. That year, he won 8 of the 16 races, securing his first world championship. His rivalry with Prost would become one of the most famous in sports history, pushing him to achieve greater heights. One of Senna's most memorable races was the 1993 European Grand Prix at Donington Park. Here, he delivered what many consider one of the greatest first laps in Formula One history. Starting in 4th place in wet conditions, he overtook several cars to take the lead before the end of the first lap, proving once again that he was indeed the Rainman. As Senna himself once said, "You cannot overtake 15 cars in sunny weather, but you can when it's raining." Little did he know, the skills that made him a formidable force on the track would soon be overshadowed by the events of a tragic weekend. As the Formula One circus arrived at the Imola circuit for the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, a dark cloud loomed over what was supposed to be just another race weekend. This was a weekend that would not only test his legendary capabilities, but also leave an indelible mark on the sport he loved, and on the man itself. The 1994 Formula One season has been regarded as a watershed moment in F1 history. Tragedy, allegations of cheating, intense media scrutiny, you name it. From every perspective, 1994 was a dramatic turning point in the history of Formula One, and the controversy began right from the very top. In the 1993 F1 season and the years preceding it, riders had access to automobile technology called driver aids that significantly assisted their performances on the track. But in 1994, authorities finally decided to put an end to that. Major rule changes were implemented, banning sophisticated electronic driver aids such as active suspension, anti-lock brakes, traction control, and launch control. These aids had become staples in the pinnacle of motorsports, enhancing driver performance and vehicle handling. Their sudden absence marked a return to a more pure form of racing, relying heavily on manual driver skill and mechanical setup. Good for the sport, perhaps, but these changes meant that cars were significantly harder to control at high speeds, particularly around the challenging bends of circuits like Imola. Drivers and teams were understandably nervous. This meant their cars were not only harder to handle, but also more unpredictable. The intense focus on mechanical grip and driver input raised concerns about safety, especially given the high-speed nature of Formula One. As teams arrived at the San Marino Grand Prix, the paddock was tense with apprehension. The Imola circuit, known for its high-speed corners and demanding layout, was an early test of how well drivers and their machines could cope with the new regulations. Discussions in the pits and amongst the teams often centered around the adequacy of the cars under these stripped-back conditions, and whether the sport had sacrificed safety in pursuit of spectacle. Everyone braced themselves for what was quickly shaping up to be one of the most dramatic and consequential weekends in the history of Formula One. Adding to the tension, the preceding days had already seen their share of drama. The unsettling weekend began during the Friday practice sessions when Rubens Barrichello, a rising star and protege of Ayrton Senna, suffered a terrifying accident. Approaching the Variante Bassa Chicane, Barrichello's Jordan lost control at high speed. The car hit a curb violently, launching it airborne. It barrel-rolled before slamming into the tire barriers. The impact absorbing some of the crash's force, but leaving the car wrecked and the cockpit exposed. As medical staff rushed to the scene, they found, miraculously, Barrichello conscious and, despite his injuries, a broken nose and a fractured arm, alive and well. His life was not in danger. Senna, upon seeing the footage of the crash, immediately went to the medical center. His relief at finding Barrichello alive was strong, but the incident and near loss of his protege deeply shook him. The foreboding atmosphere intensified the following day, during Saturday's qualifying session, when tragedy struck yet again. Austrian rookie Roland Ratzenberger, pushing hard to make his mark in only his third Formula One appearance, suffered a fatal crash that would overshadow the racing community for years to come. Ratzenberger was on a fast lap, entering the high-speed Villeneuve corner, when the front wing of his Simtech, damaged on the previous lap, failed. The loss of downforce was instantaneous and catastrophic. His car, unable to turn, continued straight off the track at nearly 190 miles per hour, colliding with a concrete wall. The impact was devastating, and the car was destroyed on the violent collision with the barrier. Senna, preparing for his own qualifying run, was immediately informed of the accident. Stunned, he abandoned his car at the pit lane and made his way to the crash site. A grim expression etched on his face. Later, at the medical center, he saw firsthand the aftermath of the high-speed impact. The loss of Ratzenberger, a colleague and a competitor in the purest sense, visibly affected him. Senna was seen with tears in his eyes, a rare crack in his usually composed demeanor, reflecting the harsh reality of the risks they all faced. Senna was reported to have spent that evening, his last on Earth, in deep conversation with close associates, reflecting on the dangers of their sport. Ayrton Senna had very good reason to be concerned. He had just ended his longtime partnership with McLaren, a team with engineers he knew and trusted, and had won 3 World Drivers' Championships with, to join Williams, a fellow top F1 competitor with the Williams FW16. This new partnership promised more on paper, at least, both in endorsements and bonuses, but the veteran F1 driver was not at ease. On the debut for his new team during the traditional preseason testing, Senna said, "I have a very negative feeling about driving the car and driving it on the limit and so on. Therefore, I didn't have a single run or a single lap that I felt comfortable or reasonably confident. I'm uncomfortable in the car. It all feels wrong. We changed the seat and the wheel, but even so, I was already asking for more room. Going back to when we raced at Estoril last September, it feels much more difficult. Some of that is down to the lack of electronic change. Also, the car has its own characteristics which I'm not fully confident in yet. It makes you a lot more tense, and that stresses you." The problems continued as the season commenced. Senna had his worst ever start to a Formula One season, failing to finish or score points in the first 2 races he took on, despite leading in both. And so, dispirited and unsettled, Senna came to Imola looking to change his fortunes. Little did he know fate had much darker plans for him. It was May 1st, 1994. On that fateful race day, as the engines revved under the Imola sun, the air was thick with anticipation and an undercurrent of unease. Ayrton Senna, ever the epitome of focus and precision, had lined up at the pole position, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his mind possibly replaying the weekend's earlier tragedies. In his car was an Austrian flag, a symbol he planned to unfurl after a successful victory, to honor the loss of his friend Roland that weekend. The green light flashed, flags were waved, and the power of the most elite moto racing machines on the planet were unleashed. Senna immediately surged ahead, his Williams FW16 cutting through the crisp air with the roar of a beast awakened. However, mere moments into the race, chaos erupted. One of the racers, J.J. Leto's Benetton, stalled on the starting grid, an immovable anchor in a sea of speed. The ensuing scramble to avoid him was immediate and frantic. Pedro Lamy, coming from behind in a Lotus, could not evade in time, colliding violently with Leto's stationary car. Debris from their shattered vehicles flew like shrapnel into the air, peppering the track and stands. Among the chaos, spectators themselves were impacted by flying debris. As the safety car rolled out, the pace slowed to a crawl, a stark contrast to the adrenaline-fueled velocity of Formula One. The Opel Vectra safety car, modest in its capabilities, led the pack, but its inadequate speed proved a critical issue. The slow pace it set caused the high-performance racing tires to cool and lose pressure, a dangerous scenario for vehicles designed for the extremes of speed. Senna, ever aware and intensely focused, recognized the problem immediately. He gestured emphatically to the safety car driver to increase the speed, his gestures visible to those watching, a silent yet intense expression of urgency and frustration. When the race finally resumed on lap 6, Senna wasted no time. He accelerated fiercely, his vehicle responding with the eagerness of a caged animal set free, reclaiming his lead and setting a blistering pace to regain tire temperature and optimal pressure. But as he approached the infamous Tamburello corner on the 7th lap, a corner known for its demanding nature and unforgiving bends, disaster struck. His car, perhaps still compromised by the earlier pacing issues or a hidden mechanical failure, failed to navigate the turn. Instead, it continued straight off the racing line at a harrowing speed of approximately 191 miles per hour. Ayrton Senna fought for control, but even one of the best drivers in the world didn't have the skill to avoid what was about to happen. Within moments, it collided with the concrete retaining wall at an estimated speed of 145 miles per hour. The impact at that speed was catastrophic, the force of the collision causing panic through the circuit and the spectators. Medical teams rushed to the scene with desperate hope, their efforts a frenzied fight against the ticking clock of fate. They worked to pull Senna from the wreckage, his car a mangled testament to the ferocity of the crash. Ayrton Senna was somehow still alive, and as the medical team frantically worked to save him, the questions began. What caused the world-class driver to lose control of his machine? After all, it was a clear day, and Senna was on his 7th lap in the lead with no cars in the flanks. At a follow-up trial, Italian prosecutors implicated the Williams Group for a faulty steering column that broke and made the car unsteerable just seconds before impact. Williams, in return, said that the steering column snapped after the crash and the accident was caused by other issues. Senna's teammate, world champion Damon Hill, believed it was driver error that sent the vehicle off the road. Michael Schumacher, who was in hot pursuit just behind Senna at Imola, said that Senna seemed nervous from the first lap and that his car jumped and jiggled on a bump, leading to the fateful curve. But whether it was mechanical flaw, driver error, or unforeseen circumstance, Ayrton Senna was fighting for his life. Telemetry would later show that Senna had hit his brakes for 2 seconds before spearing into the concrete wall. As they pulled him free from his car, the severity of his condition was clear. He'd lost almost 90% of his life force. Reportedly, a piece attached to the right front wheel penetrated his helmet and made a large indentation on his forehead. In addition, it appeared that a jagged piece of the upright assembly had penetrated the helmet visor just above his right eye. He had sustained multiple severe injuries, including skull fractures, brain injuries, and a ruptured temporal artery. Because of his severe neurological situation, the medical team performed an emergency tracheotomy on the track before he was airlifted to the hospital. Pictures of Senna being treated on the track by emergency medical personnel were taken by Senna's friend and Autosprint's picture editor, Angelo Orsi. Out of respect, those photographs have never been made officially public. For 2.5 hours, the medical team fought to save him. But, as would later be reported firsthand from the track, The impact of the wall had damaged his brainstem, rendering it inactive. Ayrton Senna tragically passed away, his final moments in his cockpit wrestling for championship in the sport he'd given everything for. In a sport where tragedies were commonplace, but fatalities were rare, the immediate aftermath of Ayrton Senna's tragic accident left the world of Formula One and sports at large in a profound state of shock and mourning. Senna was not only a towering figure in the realm of motorsports, but also a national hero in Brazil and a beloved figure internationally. The immediate response from the world of Formula One was a mix of grief and a driven resolve to enhance safety standards in the sport. The very nature of Senna's accident, occurring despite the high safety standards already in place, acted as a stark reminder of the inherent risks involved in high-speed racing. This led to immediate changes in safety protocols and a reevaluation of the safety measures at racetracks around the world. In the weeks following the tragedy, several Grand Prix circuits undertook modifications to improve driver safety. These included changes to track layouts to reduce high-speed corners and the installation of more advanced barrier technologies designed to absorb impact better. The FIA, Formula One's governing body, also initiated several short-term safety measures and began a comprehensive review of safety standards, leading to more significant regulatory changes in the following years. Senna's death became a catalyst for one of the most intensive focuses on safety in the history of Formula One. His accident, along with the death of Roland Ratzenberger the same weekend, marked a turning point that led to widespread reform in the sport's approach to safety. This included the eventual introduction of the HANS, head and neck support device, stricter crash testing standards for cars, and numerous changes to both car design and track safety standards aimed at protecting drivers better. The tragic weekend at Imola prompted the reformation of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, which had been inactive at the time. This organization, led by drivers, focused on improving safety standards and ensuring that the drivers' voices were heard in discussions about race conditions and safety technologies. In the decades since his tragic accident, Ayrton Senna's legacy continues to inspire and shape the world of Formula One. His dedication and skill not only marked him as one of the greatest drivers of all time, but also as a catalyst for significant safety advancements in the sport. Each new safety measure, each life saved during a potentially catastrophic crash, each young driver who enters Formula One with dreams of greatness, carries a piece of Senna's legacy.